Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I'm joined by my co-host and producer, Holly DeShane. So today I'm in Florida, so a lot of travel this first part of the year, helping my mom move. So getting some beach time and all that I didn't get in San Juan. So that's a big priority of mine usually in the winter. So yeah, just kind of enjoying the sunshine and getting a little bit of a reset here. So today we're going to get into this idea of permission to let things develop. So we have desires, we have goals, and our mind is a record of the past, and it's always trying to calculate what the future is going to look like for us. And so, when we're taking new actions, shifting our beliefs, there is this kind of uncertainty that comes with that, and that's all good, and that's by design, and that's actually what we want is we're shifting the energy, and so that gets things moving, and so we might have new potentials that can show up for us that we can't account for when we're leveling up. So a lot of times if we get too caught up in the meaning making of, okay, things look this way, now I'm starting to put those guardrails around things, I'm trying to pin it down into what it is, I might be limiting myself in certain ways. And so it's just allowing ourselves to be present with situations. We continue to show up, we continue to put the work into things. But then by design, it is when we're remolding the mind, it's like we're not going to have this accurate expectation we can place on the future. It's just being at peace with that process. So the further along you get on your path, things start to be pretty clear. It's just not kind of reining things in super early and allowing things to develop, allowing that energy to gather so that we can get a better version. We might sell ourselves short if we're just projecting the past and the future. So, today we're going to get into some of those details. It is always this kind of building, like as I unpack the past, it's like things should be different for you. Our ability to forecast is going to change. And it is a bit of a surrender and a patience process to do that. And so we're always just trying to find peace with the moment and just kind of get a sense of where the energy is leading and guiding us. So anytime we're creating something new, that that's more of what we want to function from, is like letting things happen, allowing things to develop before we try to pin it down super fast. So
before we jump into that, I'm going to do our question of the week for Brandon. And as a reminder, if you are interested in submitting a question, you can do so via DM on any of the socials or email or text message or whatever, phone call, any of those ways. Yeah.
So many messaging options these days. So
yep. Any of them will do, and we would love to hear from you if you do have a question. So the question this week is similar to one of the questions that was in the Ask Me Anything a couple weeks ago. But this one's more, rather than centered on injury, it's centered on hormones. So when we're talking about these kind of emotional reactions, feeling them in the body, as particularly women, it's true for men too, but as you get older, like hormones change, things change. For women, hormones change like monthly. So how do things like hormones impact some of these feelings we're having, like anxiety or fear or things like that?
So anything that affects how we feel is also going to affect our mindset, and hormones definitely can swing things back and forth for us. That's, for as a guy, if testosterone's low, you definitely feel like more depressed, like less ambitious, like that kind of thing. I can't speak specifically to the woman experience, but I deal a lot with that, especially, towards menopause, things like that, that can get a little dicey where you don't feel like yourself. I think all these things do fall in the realm of belief. I think that's our operating system, and it's our relationship to aging. It's our relationship to emotions. It's a relationship to a lot of societal norms and beliefs about that stuff as well. I think, so Dr. Joe Dispenza, are you familiar with him?
Yeah.
He does a lot of interesting things where, he does a lot with emotions, but he also digs into the science of how your emotional state does coincide with your hormones. So, we usually think of cortisol as the stress hormone. And so if I'm in fight or flight all the time, cortisol is generally going to be elevated. I'm going to have trouble sleeping, that kind of stuff, because my mind's always in this go mode. But so, he links kind of that idea. He goes deep into like how these emotional states affect your hormones. If I have these big, heavy emotions, there's always something there for me to learn. It's about unpacking that stuff and bringing it to a better place. And that, based on his work, that we could deduce that that would affect hormone levels. It's like because you're shifting your beliefs, you're shifting what you believe about yourself. And so that's like shifting my relationship to these different ideas. And so when we're talking about like the monthly cycle for women, emotions do get elevated, but there could also, we're dealing with fertility, we're dealing with things like that. So there could be negative beliefs about sexuality there. There could be kind of suppression going on. And so your body's always like pushing back against these things, right? So I'm basically imposing limitation on my body, and it's making me feel bad about myself. But it's like really the goal is to get in tune with your emotional cycles and just kind of seeing like, and the moon also affects things, right? So it's like pulling on our emotions. They say the moon's responsible for like the waves in the water, right? And most of our body's water. So that's usually how we make that connection. But and the water is related to the emotional realm. It's kind of, these things are kind of deep and mystical, and they're difficult to explain, but it's really just important to get in tune with your own personal cycles. Like much of our day to day, we're like forced to override emotions and go against them just to keep moving. And so we could be denying a lot of things in that process. When the big emotions surface, it might not be appropriate for the moment, but we do want to take a step back and examine those and understand them a little bit better when we do have the space. And so that's why I'm always just a huge advocate of taking that time to do so, because you get a lot of clarity and then your body starts to rebalance itself out. Because if I'm in a negative emotion and I have these negative thoughts, like I'm in that stress response, and then my body keeps like shutting down the feelings when we actually need to go into them and experience them in order to move through them. And once we do that, it starts to free up the energy for the body to restore itself and things to get back into balance. So, and guys with, that struggle with like low testosterone, all that stuff, the common patterns you might see is, they get walked all over by everybody. They're people pleasers, a lot of failure, let down, disappointment, being emasculated by a partner. Things like that can all affect those hormone levels. It's more of how you're showing up in your day to day. If we have something that's way out of balance, it's generally the deeper emotions associated to that are really suppressing and shutting down hormones with this perspective. So, it's super interesting stuff. And yeah, if you're kind of looking for more of a scientific approach, I would probably look more into Joe Dispenza's work. But yeah, I think like any of that stuff, it's just kind of, you look at what's showing up in your life, and your body's constantly regulating and responding to that. So if I have things shut down, that is going to be suppressing certain hormones, and that's going to affect my ability to move forward and the way I show up and like all that stuff. So that's what I love about mental emotional work, is because it kind of covers all these bases. It touches all the arenas, like sometimes indirectly. Like a lot of my thing is, once we resolve the deeper emotional issues, a lot of things, just all the problems generally take care of themselves. The body's very good at balancing out if we don't get in our own way, and we get in our own way with these mental emotional blocks.
Yes, I agree. I had a conversation earlier about the getting in your own way. We'll switch gears over to this idea of permission to let things develop. I don't know if you would equate it to the same idea as permission to be patient,
Yeah,
but that's a little bit.
it's pretty similar.
Yeah. But in your opening, you said something, so I have a bit of a question about it, but I want to make sure you don't have something you want to start with.
You can just shoot.
You mentioned the ability to forecast changing. In my experience in my own life, I'm pretty terrible at forecasting. So are we saying that the ability to forecast will get better?
It's more of, so the more I trust, the more I'm at peace with the unknown, the more I can, my intuition wakes up, and the more I'm like in tune with things, and I kind of know what the natural next steps are. Specifically when we've had a lot of trauma, there is just this dependence on like knowing what's next. And generally that shows up in a ton of planning and flexibility and like all that. Because like if I was in an environment where I didn't really know what was going to like set off a parent, or, there's just all these volatile emotions. It's like I'm always just trying to cling to safety. I'm trying to cling to something that I can predict, that feels safe. And a client, talked to me about like a baby blanket at one point, and that's kind of that. Oh, like given everything going on in a chaotic environment, it's just like the one thing that felt me say feels made me feel safe was a baby blanket. If we remove that, then you kind of lose your sense of safety, right? Or that predictable thing you're looking for. And let's say so the when we have a lot of uncertainty, that does also like spike cortisol if we're not used to it, right? So I've been very conscious about developing my capacity for uncertainty. And there are definitely that plays into a lot of the ego death stuff we've talked about before, where it's just like your mind is a meaning making machine. It's a predicting machine. It does all these things, and it's using your past. And so it's always trying to calculate what's coming next because that's what's supposed to bring me safety. But I can develop the skills to feel safe no matter what, even in uncertainty, even in chaos. It's just that's really built on self-trust and like me being in tune with myself. Like I trust that I'm going to be guided to safety. So me, I can travel anywhere in the world and I'm like never worried about anything. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to keep my awareness up. And if I get a nudge, then I'll go a different direction, right? It's like a very moment to moment processing. And that's developed through a lot of like challenging, like resisting that ability of your mind to cling to certainty constantly, right? And so the more you're at peace with uncertainty, now we get the cortisol starts to regulate where it's not actually like stressful for me to not know anymore. When we're dismantling the protection mechanisms that might have come from a traumatic environment, yeah, we do need some tools. We need some anchors to be like, okay, well, like at least this makes me feel safe. At least like I can cling to this idea and it makes me feel okay. Because we're trying to let go of the small world thinking of just like, okay, this is what's predictable, and so I'm just going to do this every day of my life. That's the number one priority is survival. And so our mind's always trying to keep that at the front of our mind of like, I've done this before and I've survived, so that means it's good. And that's pretty low standard. If you just survive something, that might not be what we want to like build our life on. It's this ability to let go, release some of those ideas once you're in a better place, right? Like, so whatever got you through childhood, that was needed. And maybe what got you through like struggles in college, that was what was needed. But those aren't always like optimal patterns. Those aren't always like optimal things for our health either. It's more of those things were needed at one point, and so they really helped me through whatever tough times I had. But ultimately, that's going to be the stuff that shrinks my world, that holds me back. Is going to be clinging to that stuff too tightly. We have to create safety other ways so that we feel safe in letting go of the baby blanket. It's that idea that everything can be a phase or it can be permanent. It depends on whether you're working with your mind or not, right? Because our mind is just simply repeating the past over and over again, and it wants to continue that process, and it's just projecting that into the future. And a good sign is like if the life you're living is like exhausting and you feel miserable all the time, that means you're probably clinging to a lot of like safety beliefs that it might be terrifying to change. And at least I know what this is rather than the unknown. And so a big part of this work is once again building up the safety that I trust myself and I know how to navigate these situations. We do that through unpacking your past and learning about them. But then it's also I need to find this broader like faith or trust that I'm actually moving towards a brighter future, that it's not just going to be a repeat of the past. That's where I have to kind of resist that temptation to try and like mold things and form things too early on, because my mind's just trying to do that so it can predict things. And let's say like most plans, like there's always adjustments, right? There's always moving parts. If we need some structure to kind of frame up our mind, that's good. But then I always say, build in room for the unknown. We need some wiggle room because there are just many things in my life. Like there's a lot of things I couldn't account for. I didn't see that come in. And a lot of those are like the blessings I've received, right? It's just like your mind knows what it knows. And anything outside of that, especially if we're in that survival mindset, it's automatically going to make that mean something that's a bad thing. But, that's where we kind of deny our blessings, is when we don't trust that process, that, hey, maybe this is actually for my own good. Maybe this is actually bigger than I imagined. Maybe it's going to like look different than I thought it would. And that's all okay, because we get to mold things. And if I'm really just fixated on creating safety with something early in the process, I might kill my dream. I might kill my desire because I'm not willing to like follow the path. Okay. The following the path is learning to trust yourself on the path. And it's also making peace with the unknown, because I want what's unknown to me, because that's outside of what I know, right? My mind just keeps replaying the same patterns over and over again until I break the cycle. When I break the cycle, I need to keep doing it if I want to create a different version of my life, right? The big things that generally shake us up is, like a major life change, career transition, moving to a new city, like all that stuff. It's like generally those aren't smooth transitions, because there's like so many unknowns that you have to figure out. But it's like once you get settled into that, now we get our bearings and we get more comfortable. But usually it takes about a couple months to really get settled into anything new, especially the major life changes. It's just kind of knowing that if I want a better version, like that's part of the process. Is there's the periods of being unsettled. There's the periods of like not knowing what's coming and what's next, and just trusting that I can handle it. And the challenges I get are designed to serve me. They're designed to refine me. They're designed to expand my mind in new ways if I work through them. But if I view every challenge and obstacle as like a bad thing, I'm not meeting the moment, right? And I'm just going back into what's safe, right? And so it's allowing things, okay, I have these desires, I'm putting them out there, I'm putting the work in that direction. It's allowing that process to unfold, rather than, trying to mold it too soon. It does take a lot of self-trust, but then, we don't want to be like blindly optimistic, but we want to like believe in the work we're putting into something, and there's all these quotes about, the work you're kind of doing in silence, like the universe starts to like orchestrate people to like come into your life to take that to the next level, right? So that's the stuff we're taught, like, chance meetings, like all these things, like you don't really know until it happens. But we need to create space to allow that to happen. And when it pops into our life, we don't shut it down or deny it, and that we're actually like see that, hey, this isn't what I thought it was, but maybe it's even better or more interesting. And so it's like just creating space for surprise, and to be like delighted by the new things coming in. And it's very difficult to trust that, especially, if you've had a hard path, if you had a lot of disappointment and letdown. The natural tendency is to be very skeptical and to question everything. And that's just because our mind's kind of in overdrive of trying to protect us all the time. And so that's why it's so important to open it up and heal these wounds, so that we're not sabotaging our creations.
I can't remember which Stoic it is, but it's the one that says something about everything good in your life came from change,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it works both ways, even though we tend to think of change as bad.
And change itself, like that's the nature of everything. Everything is all evolving and changing. I have the power to resist it, and that's generally where I get stuck in the past. I stop moving with life. Is like I stop trusting life. But really, it's like everything should be this gradual increase. Like if I'm continuously working through my challenges and realigning and building myself, we only get caught up and stuck when we don't process the emotions, because then now I'm telling myself these negative stories to limit my life based on those negative emotions. And so then I stop trusting life. So, stagnation and not looking at and processing emotions are the exact same thing. And that's why, it's one of my big missions to just really like emphasize like how important emotions are, especially as a man, like, guys like don't like to go there. But they just like, many of them just live the same life their whole life, right? Because it's just like they're not examining these things, working through them. And then they build all these rules to follow to keep themselves safe, or, to close off life. And it's just like, yeah, that's chronic stress. That's what puts your body in a disease state. That's all these, it's just like these things accumulate and stack up over time. And so the challenges are designed to shape us. They're designed to grow us. And it is through facing and working through emotions that we do that. Everything is an emotional experience. and whether we like it or not. And so we can deny it, but it's also like now we're not getting the feedback we need to grow. So you're basically handcuffing yourself by not taking a look at this stuff. And so yeah, once we go in and figure out where the emotions are stuck and get them moving, like things can open up pretty rapidly. But it's just like there's part of you that doesn't trust things. Now I'm skeptical. I might, overly like rely on like kind of intellectual stuff. I might just be too much in that mode of what I can prove. Well, so whatever you can prove, that's like I believe that's concrete and that creates certainty in my life. But well, like that's operating at a very slow pace. Like if I'm waiting for like science to validate everything in my life before I take the step, like I'm going to be way far behind, right? So the answer is to get in tune, to address things head on, work through them. And then that's where we build that trust to flow with life. And so it's developed, we need the logical aspect, but then we also need to pay attention to the emotional aspect, and the recipe is to bring them together. It's the integration of the two that really makes us effective in life. And so, if somebody's emotionally disconnected, they're not, generally picking up, social awareness cues, there could be a lack of emotional intelligence. They don't know how to work with people in order to further their lives. And right. So they start limiting themselves. Right. So this realm, there's so many gifts there, and we call them soft skills, but it's like these are actually like more and more appreciated as the most valuable skills there are. And for good reason, because that is really how you transform things, is in this realm.
You touched on a couple things I was thinking as you were talking too, and that's the emotional versus the logical. I was working with a group this week and we were talking about the change curve or the grief curve. And that came up of like, we like to think that we're logical, but we are not, in fact, logical beings by nature.
No,
So, yeah.
you could be really out of touch with your emotions and you think you're really logical, but it's still an emotional decision. It's still like, and that's what's like funny about this stuff is like, why can't you just admit it? Like,
Yeah.
they're a part of the human experience, and that's actually where all the good stuff is, right? Is my ability to like feel the whole experience. Now I'm really in tune with reality and I can actually build a life based on that. But if I'm like suppressing and shutting things down, I don't have that feedback to work from. And so I'm just like totally in my mind trying to manipulate things now. And a lot, you see this, you get a lot of hypocritical people that way because, they're not in tune emotionally, but they might be following certain rules, but like a lot of the things they might be doing are like way out of integrity, right? And they're just manipulating other people, but then they can like tell themselves they're a great person or whatever. But it's like no, like the things you're doing here are actually detrimental to others, right? And so that's also what's cool about this work is, when you get really in tune, you know that if you do something detrimental to another person, that actually affects you, right? And so you like stop doing those things, because it's just like it's not worth it, right?
When we're thinking about this idea of letting it develop, and, there's a lot of aspects we've touched on so far, it can feel really difficult to sit and wait on something. Let's talk a little bit about working through that in kind of a practical way when we're coming up against the timeline isn't going how we wish it would go.
Time and time again, I've said it, the timing is the most difficult piece. And the second most difficult piece is the how. Especially, there's a lot of things where like, okay, if I take these actions, in a lot of our systems, like companies and in school and stuff, you're just like, okay, I just have to do these things and I get to the next level, right? It's a very like obvious path, but not every path is that way where it's not as scripted. And so the how can come in different ways. We have to be open to receive that. The timeline piece is like if I'm feeling bad about something and I want to make the change, like I don't want to feel the discomfort anymore, right? That's why I want the change to begin with. So it's just like seeing like that's the nature of it, is just like I think that this thing will fix my problem. I want that to happen as fast as possible so I feel better. That's how where the timeline problems come in, is like we think the thing is going to fix our problem, but it's always like us working through the tension. It's always us being in the discomfort and growing our mind to a new level where we detach from a lot of the personal things that are making us feel terrible and we depersonalize the stories of like, okay, this is the game I'm playing. It's not who I am. Like I can change who I am. But if I identify with the problems and that's who I think those are always going to be problems, then like that's where I feel stuck and I can't move forward. And so it's like I envision myself being this other person or doing this thing, and that would validate that like I'm on the right track, that and I would feel better about myself. But it's a journey to get there. And that journey is not linear. It moves faster the quicker you get on board with what we're talking about here. It moves faster when you're like, okay, well, like, yeah, I have to like learn these skills. I have to grow my mindset to see these things rather than getting plugged into limiting beliefs, shutting down, telling myself the negative story about I'm not good enough. It's more of like I can't like believe that stuff and get to where I want to go. So that's actually what the work is. It's rebuilding our mind to become the person that's capable of executing the thing we want to do. That's process, and it's a self-discovery journey, and that's we want something to shoot for because that's what, and we want something with enough desire behind it that it makes us stretch ourselves. It makes us like want to grow because that's like the prerequisite is like if I'm not living this life, like I have to grow in order to get there. And that's an uncomfortable process. Like it's like discomfort is the nature because we get the signal of discomfort anytime we're confronted with a part of ourselves that's in conflict with what we want. So I believe this thing, I believe, and that doesn't line up with what I want. And so I have to find a way to move through this, to shift my mind about it, to heal the past that wants to protect me from it. And I have to let these things go in order to free myself up to continue to gather this energy to create the thing. And so you speed up the process by removing resistance. And resistance is always about the self belief. It's always like the things oh, and it might not even be self belief. I might have a victim mindset where I think it's everybody else's fault. And now I have nothing to work with. So we always just like own our own energy of like, okay, what parts of me is blocking this? And the more I dig into that and I see my role in the situation, now that's like I do become internally focused and I start to realize that I do have the power to create anything. It's just more of like we all start with this external focus that it's just like, somebody got lucky or, we don't see the work that somebody put into something and we think that it was just given to them or whatever it is. All these things. And that's why I like love working with athletes because you can't really cheat that system, right? It's it's like either you can do it or you can't, right? You have to train, you have to work on it. And the results are pretty close to the work you're putting into it. There could always be mental blocks that are sabotaging you, but if you put a lot of time, energy, and effort into something, you're going to develop certain skill sets. You might have a tough time like performing under the spotlight, like we talked about last week, and those types of things might happen, but you're still going to have something to show for it. And so it's just kind of seeing that, patience, it's patience with yourself. It's patience with like, okay, I'm at where I'm at. I have these desires. I have to keep finding ways to move in that direction. It doesn't mean it's going to be a smooth road. It doesn't mean it's going to happen as fast as I think it does on Instagram or whatever. It's just being in tune with that process. That's how you strengthen yourself. That's how you build yourself. That's how you create resilience to sustain the path. And they're all stages, right? So when I'm branching off, I'm going to go through that gauntlet I talk about where anybody that I used to relate to, if I'm like branching off from that, now I get like the shame and the guilt that's like designed to pull me back in. And so I have to like master that stage where I start to care less and less what people think. It's an individuation process, so it's more of like rather than taking my cues from other people, I'm like building this strong, sustainable self so that I don't like need that feedback anymore. Like in my emotions are my own feedback, where how I feel about something and what I believe about it, like that's my measuring stick to where I'm going. Okay. And so if I'm in conflict with what I want, that's going to create resistance in the body. And so all we do is we just keep clearing out the resistance over and over again until it becomes a matter of fact. It's just like, it's like, oh yeah, like I no longer harbor all these negative ideas about myself. I believe in my ability to create. I've put in the work, and then that's when opportunities start to open up. I start gathering the energy and now I start to create options for myself that start to open new doors that weren't there before. That's because I put in the work. That's because like I refined myself to the point of seeing it as possible. I'm no longer at that beginner stage. And so it does take that patience, but it's like every step of the way, you should feel more sure of yourself. You should feel more confidence. You should feel better about yourself as a result as well, because we're no longer just operating from this idea that things are just happening to me. We're taking control of that. We're building ourselves to, be sustainable on the path. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. There's things that are going to come into your life that are going to refine you so that you go even deeper and strengthen yourself even more. So it's just like we remove the timelines, all that stuff, because it's not helpful. It's more of just being in tune with where you're at, continuing to move in that direction, and then the path reveals itself as you go on it. And through that process, you get more and more clear on what you want too. So the further along I am, the more I formulate the idea of what's actually like true for me. So what I started with might be totally different by the time I'm like halfway through it, because I've like gained all this experience, like I'm seeing it differently. I'm deeper in my knowledge about it. I'm going to see things differently at every level anyway. Okay. So whatever plan I started with is not the plan I'm going to end with. It's just this ongoing journey of like, I'm always going to make new decisions based on my vantage point. As I go down that road, I'm allowing myself that open-endedness of each moment. I'm going to decide new things about life based on where I'm at. Because what I used to believe, if I don't believe that anymore, my reality is going to shift and things are going to be different for me. That's why I don't want to operate on old ideas, because then I just keep trying to go back to what's safe. And as we open it up and the new opportunities develop, now, I have some things I can take with me. I have skill sets, I have this knowledge, I have this self-awareness that I start to trust no matter what path I take, it's going to be okay. There's no right or wrong answer. That they're just going to bring me different experiences. And all those experiences are designed to clarify even more what I want. It's a continual refinement of like with every step, we're given new data and we integrate that data. And then from that, we make new decisions. So a lot of times it's just allowing things to come to you and then picking and choosing along the way and just kind of seeing where it leads. And if you go down a path and you're like, that's not what I thought it was, it is that ability to step back and like I've created all these skills now, so I can just pivot and go this other direction pretty easily. And so I just keep moving in the new direction now.
Do you have any examples, like stories that you could share?
Let's see here. This is like kind of like my whole life, so I don't.
Great. You should
Yeah.
have a lot then.
No, well, yeah, that's the thing is like process so many things that they're not like relevant to me anymore. So sometimes it's tough to zero into them, but it's more of that. The main idea for me is that like everything I ever like planned to do like didn't work out the way I thought it would. Then I just stopped planning and I just like kept working on myself. Cause I'm like, yeah, if I like develop these skills, I'll have options. And that's kind of where I'm at now, where it's, I can work with any type of person. It doesn't really matter to me and all, but yeah, I started in the athlete lane because that's what was familiar to me. It's just pivoting every step of the way. And I think many of us do that with our careers pretty easily. If you're doing something so regularly, like, 8 hours a day or whatever, there's usually like a pretty loud awareness that when you're not happy with what's going on, right? So then you start scanning for like, okay, what's like a different version? What's something that's like a little bit better at least? That might mean moving companies, that might mean moving jobs within a company. There's all that stuff of just like, yeah, if I'm not happy with what's going on, I believe in my power to create something new. And so it's just like, I have to expand my perception and I have to see what my current options are. And I have these skill sets, like how can I apply them to this? Let's say people apply for jobs they're not technically like qualified for, but it's just like, well, yeah, this would be exciting for me, so I'm going to see what happens, right? So it's being in tune with what's exciting and what interests you, because those are usually the things that are gonna you can work with that. Like you're gonna wanna like dig deeper and learn more, like when you're interested in something. It's the ability to sift and sort through stuff where you just kind of throw away the things that don't fit on a regular basis. And it's like, okay, I didn't like that experience. Like, do I need to change things, or was that just kind of a one-time deal, or was that to show me something about myself? And that's usually what it was. But like we're always just being taught these lessons, whether we see them or not. With every lesson, I have this bigger pool to pull from of like what my preferences are. We're just always seeking to align with more and more of our preferences. And that's what I think what freedom is like you're never like trapped somewhere. It's like, yeah, I might go through something that's a struggle that I don't like, but I never like believe I'm going to stay there. I believe that, if I make adjustments, I can get on a new track, right? And so it's just this continual process of adjustments. And so yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of like riddled through my whole career path of just like, yeah, this isn't exactly what it is, but this is a little more exciting. So I'm like curious about it. So I might try to open some of those doors. I might get some conversations going. I might like tinker with my title and call myself something different. It's just kind of like pivoting to just find what like clicks in with me now. But then that's like, you're not like stuck there either. You can do that for a little bit and you don't have to stay there, and that was like earlier in my career where I just worked with baseball players, because I was a baseball player but it was just like, no, I'm so burnt out on this. I don't care about it anymore. Oh yeah, I pretty much never watch baseball anymore. It's like another life to me. But there's many people that retire from their playing days in baseball and then they just become baseball coaches and then that's what they do the rest of their life, right? Because there's not like the deeper thought going on. Is this like still true for me? And it might be. Some people like are really gifted at that, but it might not feel right. And so then that's when you pivot. You make an adjustment because this doesn't feel like me anymore. And so I need to go on this journey to discover what that is. And that might take a little bit of trial and error. That is like being in the unknown. That's like sitting in the discomfort of that uncertainty, but it's that willingness to be in that space in order to get the clarity. Not everything in life is just step by step, and we want it that way, and that's like the flaw in being very like action oriented is like I might just take the same actions over and over again my entire life, and those might not be producing great results for me. So it's this ability to take a step back and question things and go deeper with them. That's what opens new doors. That's what gives us new avenues to go down is I have to be able to apply my past to my future, right? So it's like I've developed all these things that can be expressed many different ways, but many of us just think we have to stay in one lane. Or if I can just like veer off an inch. And so I'm just got to do something very similar. And like, that's not true at all. Like what we want is these skill sets are applied to unlimited things. But that takes creativity to see that. So that's what we're trying to do is in the uncertainty, you have to think creatively. You have to open up your mind to see different possibilities. And then we go and explore those possibilities and see what they have for us. And not every road we go down is the right one, but it's still probably going to give us that clarity of like, okay, I tried that and that wasn't the right fit. So now I'm going to try something else.
The sort of idea of waiting on something to develop and being patient with it, while like I agree that the more you do this work, the easier all of that stuff gets. Let's just plug doing this work like, one more time. There's like there's the like I did the thing, I took the action, I built it. It's very exciting. But now the next step for me is doing the thing that's less comfortable, which is self-promotion, right? Like now I have to tell people this was a secret. I kept it to myself. I did all this work. And now I have to tell people about it and try to sell it. And it feels terrible now to like that part of it.
Yeah. And that's the part to grow through. That's the next step, right? Like
Yeah.
We want it to be comfortable, but like that's the nature of growth is if I'm growing, like I'm going to be confronted with things that make me feel uncomfortable because like there's beliefs about myself that, maybe I'm like a private person. Maybe I don't want to be seen in a certain light or whatever it is. And so you just keep wrestling with those ideas until you find the version that works for you. So I don't think everybody's meant to be this fully promotion. I don't like doing it. So like this, like I'm just gonna like sell people all the time. Like to me, that's like dumb, but like there's careers built around that. But it's like, there's certain personalities that like, they're really into that. It's a skill, but it's finding the right version where you feel like you can be authentic in what you're doing. You never go from the place of like, I don't want to do it at all until like, okay, yeah, I got it figured out. It's a gradual process. I have to wrestle with those ideas of like, what if I did this? Like, what if I said it this way? Like, what if I presented myself this way? You just start wrestling with it to try to open it up. Then you start trying some things with it. That's what gets you going on the journey. Because a lot of these things, it's like you're good in one area, but it doesn't mean you're good in the other areas, right? But so those areas, it's either you get somebody to do it for you that's good at it, or you challenge yourself with that growth, right? Those are kind of the two options. Otherwise, like, yeah, I'm not in that place where I'm able to share with the world, right? And that's the thing is not that you do it for yourself, but then at the same time, it's just like, well, when I'm in that place, it does have value for other people. It does serve like a greater good when I'm able to open up on a bigger level. And these things, once again, it's being patient with it. And it's just like, I'm not a big strategy person because, you try to put these like one size fits all things on people and that's just not true for most people. So it's finding the recipe of like, okay, this allows me to open this up and I can take steps in this way and that feels in alignment with who I am. And as I get going on that path, I might just like naturally start getting better at these things. But it's usually if I'm like closed off to the idea of being, promotional or salesy or whatever, that's always going to hold me back. But it's what's a version that feels good to me right now. And as I go down that road, I'm going to get better and better at it. And so I have like my style I can build from. That's going to be a process like over time of just trying different things and getting more comfortable with it. And so anything that is uncomfortable to start with, you do have to just start pushing on it to just kind of see what's there, because we're challenging a belief. We're challenging like, it's safe to be hidden. It's safe to not be visible, right? Like all those things. But it's like, once again, that's all like learned behaviors. That's all stuff that we were like taught because, we've all had like embarrassing situations. We've all been criticized. Yeah, we might have been in really intense situations where, it was much, much safer to like not be seen. So it's like all those things feed into those beliefs of, it's better for me to be a background person. And that's it, like we need that too, right? It's like for everybody that's like the face of something, they need a team behind them, right? But it's like, does the team behind them always want to stay there, or are there desires that, hey, maybe one day I want to do this, right? It just kind of depends on where you're at in your journey. That we take a look at the discomfort and see what's at the bottom of it, and yeah, like when you do that work, you might decide like you don't want to do anything with it, but at least you like know. It's just kind of taking things as far as they go, and that's it. There's musicians and stuff that, I saw one, it was like Jason Mraz or something, right? He like blew up like in the early 2000s or whatever, and then he hated all the corporate stuff. So now he just like goes, plays small shows and stuff. And those decisions of like, oh, like I took that path and I didn't like what it was. This feels more aligned and more authentic. And so the ultimate goal always, it isn't always the highest level of visibility, because there are some sacrifices that come with that. It's about finding what's the right fit for you. I think most of our work, it is like, if you're in this arena or the arts or whatever, it is to be shared on some level, but I think you get to like choose what that capacity is. And, because it's just not everybody wants to be famous. Not everybody wants all the attention, but there's still probably a version that would feel pretty good to you, maybe just not at that scale.
That makes sense. I have one more question. We've talked about the timeline. We've talked about uncomfortable feelings. We've talked about when the next step is that you need to take is the uncomfortable one. So this question is a little bit about like the vision or the imagination of the thing. And so for me personally, there's always I can imagine what I want this to look like or where I would like to end up. But let's talk about that piece of it, how that plays in, how to not let the imaginative side of it be the thing that gets you stuck or thinking it's never going to happen or whatever.
Yeah, the imagination's a very important step. That's the creative process, right? I need to be able to like see something in my mind. It gives me something to kind of latch onto. And, preferably that vision for yourself is exciting and something that makes you want to move, right? And so you kind of have to know that like the initial stages of that, like that is probably going to transform over time. I have this vision and I start building and moving towards it. And as I take the steps, each experience is going to give me clarity on a refined vision. Okay. And that's me like integrating feedback every step of the way. It's like when I was like naive and just starting off, like I thought this is what it would look like. And then as I start to move towards it, like I start to gain more of a knowledge base around it of like, okay, what's this going to take or how's this going to look? And actually, now that I'm like at this point, I see it differently. And so it's that ability to continually edit our our vision. Like I think that's like a freedom we need to establish because we can get too attached to the original vision that that is what holds us back because we're not evolving with it. So as I get on the path, all those things should be more clear. And actually, like as I get on the path, like I actually do less and less of the imaginative work because it's just like once the momentum's going, you just like keep following it, right? And then the gaps like start to fill in, and that is like unexpected things pop in, stuff you can't imagine. But each experience, we're just like integrating that and being like, okay, like this was the vision, these things are happening, and like my mind's shifting this way. So like, how do I see it now? Right. And you just like keep doing that. And that's the refinement process of like when I started, I was thinking this way about it, but now that I'm further along, I see it much differently. And so that's going to adjust my vision. I just have to keep lining up with the updated vision. And so that's by integrating each experience, because it's like what got me going isn't like what's going to get me there, right? It's like that's just designed to get us moving in that direction. And once we gather data, now it's just like I can have a more vivid idea of what the vision is because like I'm starting to learn all the specifics of what that actually takes and what it's going to look like. And so that's when I get super connected to something is when it doesn't feel so far away. So when it starts to feel like, yeah, these are like logical steps I can take that are going to continue to add up to this thing. Now it starts to become more concrete. And that's where the specifics start to fill in. And in the beginning stages, it's always a general idea. So general just means the energy is pretty open still. And the more specific I get, that means there's momentum behind it. So I'm more in tune with details. And so that's what the refinement process is we're always doing that. Based on every experience, I'm getting new feedback. And then that's what's allowing me to edit the vision.
All right. Cool. Any closing thoughts on this topic?
I think it's just important to leave room for that unknown, to not make something more than it is too soon and just be playful with things. That also is a great accelerator is when we can be connected to play because that's that relaxed creative energy where there's no resistance in play, right? So that's what speeds up the process is the more I can be playful with it. I'm not trying to put results or structure around it too early. Like I'm allowing that energy to gather and build. And we want to have fun every step of the way. Everything's not about the finish line. It's about that process and we want to learn to love that process and it's pretty cool. And there's always these things that, you can't possibly imagine that come in, but it's that directing our energy towards our desire and then our desire keeps building and it keeps getting more specific. It's just allowing it to unfold rather than trying to rein it in too quick. So, it's patience, letting go of the timeline piece. Also, the thing that is uncomfortable is probably the thing you need to work through. And once again, you don't have to be somebody you're not. So even if you work through some of the visibility stuff, it doesn't mean, you're supposed to be this grand version of it. It's you're supposed to be your version of it. And you get to decide that every step of the way. And that actually soothes the mind too. Because, when people think if I was like, oh, I'm going to be like a life coach, and then everybody says like, oh, Tony Robbins or something, right? So it's just, oh, that's what the ultimate version is. And I'm like, no, I would never want to be that, right? So it's kind of like those ideas of you have unique preferences and you don't have to be like anybody else. The more we can interject your own creative process to things, the more enjoyable and authentic it's going to be, which is going to kind of create your special sauce. What's going to make you different and unique. Then you start attracting specific people that are aligned with that. And so it's allowing that time and space for those things to develop and get clear.
I loved this. This was a good conversation. But let's talk about where people can find you, any updates you got going on, anything like that.
If you're curious about this work and would like to have a deeper conversation, you can schedule a free 30-minute strategy session with me on my website, brandonthielk.com. So it's just a brief conversation. I get a little background on you and then share how I can help. And also, if you want to register for my newsletter, The Lightning Report, that is also on my website. So each Monday, I'll send out some updates on the business and some insights for the week for you to think about. If you want to follow along on YouTube and Instagram at Brandon Thielk and TikTok at bthielk, we post out there pretty regularly. Yeah, so next week I'll be heading to Tucson. I'm going to be going to like a cycling camp, which I'm not a cyclist, but I work with a lot of cyclists and triathletes. And so, yeah, it'll be fun. It's not a super clear structure yet, but I'm sure I'll do some speaking and maybe some group work in that. So I'm looking forward to kind of more of the in-person stuff that, we started last year and we're going to continue to build off of that. So I'm excited to see how that develops. But thanks for listening. Please like, share, subscribe. And once again, if you have any questions, please send them our way.
Yeah, awesome. We'll talk to you later, Brandon.
All right. See you.